Hoi hoi, I'm Planet Walk, and today we are on to Pseudoscientist number 6 of the 12 Pseudoscientists of Christmas. Today we're talking about someone who used to be I don't think I can really call him a news host. Anyway, I think you know who we're talking about. Tucker Carlson. So Tucker has kind of always said crazy stuff, but I feel like lately I've been seeing more and more of the crazy stuff that he says. I mean, earlier this year I even covered his take on evolution. But it turns out that in the same Joe Rogan interview, he said some crazy stuff about UFOs.
The deeper level is, so if they're spiritual beings, which I believe they are, it's a binary. They're either, you're on team good or team bad. You can assign any name to it you want, but what are these things?
That is an astonishing amount of black and white thinking there. Moral ambiguity is a thing where something is not quite good, but it's also not quite bad. It's somewhere in the middle. Not everything has to be one or the other, and in fact, most of the time, it isn't.
And I think some of them are bad. And if the U.S. government knows that, or the people within the U.S. government know that, then they're serving a bad force.
Would that necessarily be the case though? Because let's say that it's true, that the government knows that bad aliens exist, but they just can't do anything about it. That does not necessarily mean that you're serving them. I mean, not fighting a person doesn't mean that you serve that person. I mean, most people that know about my existence have not fought me. Does that make them all my servants? Of course, there are plenty of other possibilities, but you get my point. Tucker seems to lack a bit of imagination here. And also, you don't need aliens or spirituality to argue that people in the government might be serving bad forces.
Well, when you say spiritual, what makes you draw that conclusion that they're spiritual?
What's the obvious? I mean, spiritual may be the wrong word. Supernatural. They're beyond nature as we understand it.
So when it comes to a lot of the reports about what people assume to be aliens, I find that a lot of the time it isn't necessarily that they're beyond nature as we know it, but that people don't understand what they're seeing. If I see a flashing light in the sky, I'm going to assume that it's an airplane, but another person could see the exact same thing and not know what they're looking at, and thus assume that it's some kind of UFO.
I mean, obviously they are. I mean, just chart their physical behavior. It doesn't, it goes outside of what we understand about physics.
Again, it seems like it's the case where a lot of people just don't understand what is going on, so they default to UFOs. That doesn't mean that it's supernatural. Someone with a bit more knowledge might look over the evidence and go, well, to me, that looks like it's infrared glare.
No visible means of propulsion, coming at indescribable speed, hitting the ocean, continuing at speeds that are impossible undersea.
So I'm not entirely sure what he's referring to here, because often when something goes underwater, you can't see it anymore. And in one video that I've seen, that is exactly the case. Where it supposedly goes underwater, you can no longer see it. Though also at the moment where it supposedly goes underwater, it's at the horizon, which is rather interesting and provides another possibility. Clearly, it must have reached the vanishing angle of attack for perspective. That is what flat earthers say, right?
So if you have a craft, any object underwater that's traveling at 500 knots as measured by sonar, right there you're challenging our understanding of physics. What is that? How can that be?
Okay, please let me know where that has happened, because I cannot find anything on that.
So, yeah.
They've tracked that? They've tracked things going 500 knots under the sea?
Yeah, really. Yeah, much faster than any object can actually go undersea. For sure. Oh, yeah.
Good on Joe Rogan for actually asking that, though I feel like Tucker's answer of, oh yeah, certainly, definitely, 100%, absolutely 100%, is very lacking. So, Planet Walk, people actually worship you and call you God? Oh yeah, certainly, definitely, 100%, absolutely 100%.
Wow.
And there's video of these things coming out of the sky into the water and also emerging from the water.
Right.
Yeah, but that's not evidence for sonar readings, which is what you were just talking about.
So it's all so blurry, though.
I don't think it's that
transmedium video.
Yeah, I don't think some of it's that blurry. I think some of it's crystal clear.
I am still waiting for the day where I see crystal clear video of some kind of UFO. Because funnily enough, the clearer the videos are, the easier it is to identify what's actually in the video. And it's never aliens.
We just don't have access to it? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Just we haven't seen it?
Correct.
So they have some stuff.
For sure.
That is literally just, the evidence exists, I haven't seen it, but trust me, bro. How do you know that they have some crystal clear footage if we don't have access to it? It's just speculation.
I mean, these are all, again, this is like the most obvious observable level of it, but then you just ask yourself, like, what is this actually?
The most obvious observable level, but all the evidence is bad, and the really good evidence we don't have access to.
And, if there's been extensive knowledge of this for decades, like maybe 80 years at least, if not going back to the 30s, 90 years.
Whilst we're pulling random numbers out of thin air, why don't we say since the 20s? Or the 1890s, 1880s. We'll say that we've been known for hundreds and thousands of years. Like, yeah, I get that the 80 years ago was in reference to Roswell, but beyond that, he's just pulling random numbers out of thin air. And also, Roswell isn't good evidence for UFOs. What it seems to be is there was a secret government project and it crashed.
To what end? So there are two possible explanations, obvious explanations. The first is the one you often hear, which is this is so heavy that if the public were to know about it, it would be just disruptive. It would be too scary. Like, you don't want to scare people for no good reason. There's nothing we can do about it.
From what I've seen, people tend to be a bit more excited at the prospect of aliens rather than scared of them. Like, anytime there's talk of aliens possibly existing, everybody just goes wild and loses their mind and doesn't think for a second that there might be something that they're missing about the whole thing. So yeah, I wouldn't be too worried about people getting scared.
And you also don't want to suggest that, the U.S. military isn't capable of protecting the country, the homeland. And it does suggest that. If you can't control these objects in your airspace, and that's known, if they can't, that's known, okay? Then that suggests a limit to the power of the U.S. military, and you don't want to tell people that because then they won't believe that they're safe. I get it.
Well, not necessarily. If you are in the military, it's not always the best idea to shoot first and ask questions later. Misidentification of something being hostile when it's not can result in some very unhappy people. Sorry we accidentally shot down $1 million drone. I thought it might just be aliens. But even if it is aliens, you don't want to accidentally shoot the wrong ones down and start an interstellar war. If we're dealing with something that we don't know much about, I would highly suggest just not starting a war.
What is the US government's relationship with these things? And there's evidence that there is a relationship and that it's a long-standing.
My question is, what is that evidence? Though, to be fair, that's my question for most of what Tucker says.
And that raises a lot of questions about intent. And so what is that? And I just personally decided, and people have been hurt by these things. That's a fact. That's a fact. It's a knowable fact. It's a provable fact.
Once again, what is the evidence for that? So far, it's just, oh yeah, certainly, definitely, 100%, absolutely 100%. Just because you confidently state that something is a provable fact, that doesn't make it so. Flat earthers will state that flat earth is a provable fact. That doesn't mean that the earth is flat.
And I'm not saying millions of people have been killed by whatever these things are, but people have been killed, and it's known because it's working its way through the courts out of the VA.
So I'd like to know what these court cases are, because I had a bit of a look, and all I could really find was one person asking the exact same question in response to Tucker Carlson a year prior to this. So once again, we have something that needs to be substantiated by evidence.
An object that is by definition supernatural. It's above the laws of nature as we understand them, and that has resulted in the deaths of people. We don't spend enough time thinking about what that adds up to. Not good, actually, not good.
You know what I think that adds up to? Aliens being pretty lousy pilots. With the amount of crashes that they've supposedly had, with the amount of people that Tucker thinks that they've killed, I think they need to send better pilots. It is wild that they're able to get all the way through space and do all these crazy things, and then they get to Earth and crash.
How many people do you think have died from these things?
I don't know, but I mean,
And is it radiation sickness? Is it what's the cause
So the person
of death?
that I talked to, I interviewed someone who was a Stanford medical school professor who's out there and worth talking to, by the way. And
you talking about Gary Nolan?
That's exactly who I'm talking about. He's effectively an expert witness in these cases, so he's an expert in brain injury. Do you know him?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I had a bit of a skim over that interview, and from what I can tell, he never claimed to have seen any of the UFOs himself. They were just people that he had been asked to take a look at that had gotten close to some unknown object. What those objects were exactly is unknown, but they do seem to emit radiation that is consistent with nuclear material. Of course, this is what I've gathered from what Gary Nolan has said.
Checks all the boxes that I care about. He's got patents, so he's like a lot of Stanford University professors. He's like independently rich.
I'm sorry, but that just comes off to me as, yeah, all I care about is that he's rich. In fact, that might actually not be too far off what he actually thinks.
So he's got no profit motive here. He's the most highly credentialed person at the university, practically.
Okay, firstly, I'm sure there's people with more credentials at Stanford University than Gary. There's a lot of people that go there. But secondly, whilst he may not have a profit motive, he may have a motive to just want fame. And appearing on Tucker Carlson's show is certainly a way you can go about that.
His conclusion, as you know because you've talked to him, is that there's some kind of energy coming off here that scrambles people's brains or kills them. And it's not exactly radiation, at least in his telling to me.
1 second, I'm just going to go double check something.
So what the injuries you saw are not inconsistent with like exposure to nuclear material?
Correct. Yeah.
So apparently that is not exactly radiation. Learn something new every day.
American citizens have died and you're hiding it? Why are you hiding that? Why would you hide that?
If it were really a thing that they were trying to hide, you'd think they'd have a way of making Gary stay quiet, wouldn't you?
I would wonder how much interaction they really do have with these things. Like, if I was from another planet or if I was some interdimensional being, I don't know how much I'd give a shit about the president. I don't know how much I'd give a shit about the government. I would probably look at this infantile race. I'd probably look at them as very chaotic, and I wouldn't really have much concern for who's running it. Especially if they have the ability to travel at insane speeds and go undetected. And
he does have a point. If aliens are able to go undetected, then why would they bother with our governments or anything like that? Especially given that there are hundreds of governments in the world. Government officials are changing all the time. There's so much that they would have to keep up with. And eventually you'd have someone come forward saying, yeah, aliens are talking to governments.
Well, it depends. Like that. Okay, so the template that you're using to understand this is like science fiction, right? These are an advanced race of beings from somewhere else. But the template that every other society before us has used is a spiritual one. Mm-hmm. There is a whole world that we can't see that acts on people, a supernatural world that's acting on us all the time for good and bad. Every society has thought this before ours.
Ah, yes, the old flat earth argument of people in the past all used to think this way, so it therefore must have some kind of validity. But regardless of what framework you might be using to work out what aliens are thinking, you do have to take things from a logical standpoint. Like, if they're getting involved in politics, then there needs to be a reason for them to care what actually happens to humans. And if they're doing dastardly deeds in politics, then there has to be a reason why they want bad things for humans. Like, are we just gonna say that it's the lizard people? Again? Is that where this is headed?
In fact, every society in all recorded history has thought that until, I'll be specific, August 1945, when we dropped the atom bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and all of a sudden the West is just officially secular. We're God. There is no God but us.
Tucker Carlson seems to have a very weird view of what happened in history, especially given that after World War II there was a heavy push for Christianity in opposition to those godless commies. So no, the West did not become secular upon obtaining nuclear weapons. That's not how religion and secularism works.
But the core idea does not differ, never has differed from caves until now, that we're being acted on by spiritual forces at all times. And so to someone born before or living before 1945, I think it would have been much more obvious that this is the thing that every society has written about.
Well, of course people would think that, because people tend to associate things that they don't know about with things that are a bit more familiar to them. We have actual examples of this happening when it comes to cargo cults, where they see technology that they don't understand and then assume that it's something to do with the divine or with God. So of course, if aliens exist and people in the past saw them, then they'd probably react in a very similar way to how cargo cults might react to our modern technology. Does this mean that they'd be correct about what's happening? Not necessarily. They just have their own biases about how the world works, kind of like Tucker Carlson does.
And in fact, that battle, that unseen battle around us, that spiritual battle, has like been the basis of every society, of every religion, not just Christianity.
I mean, that's kind of a necessity for religion if you want to be able to explain why bad things happen in the world. Otherwise, you're just left with gods that are assholes, which, to be fair, some religions are like that.
So, like, it just, once you discard your very, very recent assumptions, relatively speaking, about how the world works, you're like, well, that kind of seems like the obvious explanation, right?
I mean, yeah, if you discard all the other possibilities and just consider the possibility that Tucker Carlson wants you to consider, then you're going to go, oh yeah, that's the obvious possibility. Just like if I discard all the evidence that Earth is a globe, then obviously I'm going to think that the Earth is flat, aren't I? In fact, given all that we've seen today, I wonder how much effort it would take to convince Tucker Carlson that the Earth is flat. I don't think it would take much, really. But anyway, that is it for this video. And funnily enough, we're not actually done with UFOs in this series. I've actually already recorded a video where I talk about UFOs. So be sure to subscribe to catch that, and leave a comment letting me know who you think the next pseudoscientists are going to be. As always, a big shout out to my $20 or more patrons: Hugh Jarsz, M.C.Nutkin, Tony C, Rosyna Keller, Ray, KidVicious, Definitely Not NASA, Morrie, Kaylee, and FistWizard. If you want to support me financially, you can do so on Patreon. There should be a link there, or you can buy me a coffee. I will see you in the next video. Between you and me, oh yeah, certainly, definitely, 100%, absolutely 100%.